This is a Balanced Brain podcast with your hosts, Melanie Nicholson and Sean Clift.
Welcome back to the Balanced Brain podcast. My name's Sean Clift, and I'm joined by my very good friend and co-host, Melanie Nicholson. Melanie, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Sean. We haven't caught up for ages.
We haven't. We've had a little bit of a break, haven't we? So it's so good to finally get back together and get a new episode out. So it's been a while since we've caught up. We've had a little bit of a break from the podcast. What's been happening with you, Mel?
Just pivoting to different things, I guess. Like, I don't do so much coaching anymore. I've gone more into the creative aspects. I'm running a meditation, awakening course, spiritual awakening course at the moment.
Oh, wow. What's happening with that?
It's just like every Monday night, just talking about developing your self-awareness and insights into, your beliefs and where you're going. And it's been really good.
Look, that sounds super interesting. To be honest, I had a period where I wasn't meditating for a while, and it really affected me. And I've really just got back into it the last couple of months since the new year. So, I missed it.
Yeah, I was the same too, Sean. Like, I had stopped it for quite a while, and then I was asked to do this, and I thought, well, I have to. It made me get back into the practice. I mean, I do still always meditate, but not as regularly as I did, not every day.
Yeah, I'm back to every day again now.
I need to do that, but it's just been.
Mel, it's really important to practice what we preach, and I guess that's why we've had a little bit of a break, isn't it? We've both had a pretty challenging couple of months, to be honest, haven't we? We've had a lot to deal with, both of us. We've been in contact with each other personally, obviously, because we're great mates. But it's been a little while since we've had the podcast. So you and I both thought, look, we're both dealing with a lot of stuff at the moment. Let's put the podcast on the back burner until we're both back ready to go. So, for me, I had a really bad injury, to be honest. I broke my leg and pulled tendons in my knee, and it really sort of shook me physically and mentally with work and stuff like that. So I had a few months of recovery there. What happened with you, Mel?
I'm just going through. I think it's. I'm finding it really difficult to process the last few years and things that have happened, obviously with COVID and all of that that's gone on. And to me, like the fracture in my community and relationships, and I'm still really struggling with that. So, it's been a bit better because I've been able to, like, for me, the creative industries were probably the worst at being divisive about the whole thing. So I really felt on the edge of that for a while. But I've just re-entered by being successful in being able to exhibit my work on the 8th of March.
Oh yeah, tell me about that. You've got a poem that's being exhibited, isn't it? Tell us about that.
Yeah, the poem, it's called Alchemy, and it's actually the story of, it sounds a bit out there, but it's about having to choose. When I had my brain injury, I had to choose whether I could have my skull back or a titanium plate. And
wow, what a choice.
Yes, I know. So I chose the titanium plate, and the poem is about, is really for me about how the medical world dealt with my brain injury in a really technical way, but never talked about the emotions that I would experience, or so much going on. And so that really caused me to shut down that side of myself for like a good 10 years, like almost in denial that I had a traumatic event. And through the poem, like, eventually the only way out was experiencing all of those emotions and putting them together again, alchemizing them. I talk in the poem about, paving old grief with new grief, paving over, those really difficult things I experienced. And I realized that denying that trauma had happened had led to so much heartache and psychological torture for myself over like a good 10 years, like all through my 30s.
Yeah, so, right.
It's a poem about alchemizing trauma, not getting stuck in it, but and I guess for me, like, pretty much since 2016, I made a big pact with myself to not ever do that again, not be denied things that have happened. And that's why it's been so hard the last few years, because you can't talk about it. There's so much silence about it. And I know how that ends up. I know.
Yeah. So your poem's about, it's about the brain injury, isn't it? And how certain people dealt with it, and how it sort of almost took your spirituality
Yes.
away in a way, didn't it? Like it was. Tell us about that.
Like, so I've always been like, since I was a little kid, I was always quite spiritual, but and it's always there in the background for me because it can't be, it's part of myself that I can't deny, but I really allowed myself to put, to not, to me is the overarching philosophy of my life now, but for that 10-year period, really in my 30s, I went into a lot of head-based overthinking, trying to sort trauma through the mind when it was always
Right.
reality and the heart that was the answer.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it just, the brain can never solve anything. It's always through processing and releasing emotions and then making something out of that new.
Yeah. So that, like, dealing with that trauma was really difficult. And I think one of the reasons why we've had a little bit of a break, Mel, over the last couple of months is that there's been something really particular that's almost blocked being able to go forward, because I guess for so long over that COVID period of time, like a lot of people, like a lot of podcasters, like a lot of publishers, like a lot of people that are putting stuff out on the internet, I guess we kind of self-censored ourselves, didn't we?
Not to self-censor, I was because I've been this, I guess for me, I started losing friendships long before the vaccine came in 2021, because I've been writing about I've been quite shocked by every tactic that was used since 2020, and I was actually banned for posting pictures of Victoria Police shooting rubber bullets at Victorians during a protest when the unvaccinated were locked down, and I received a 6-month ban across all social media for that. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, it's actually been technical. It's not just censorship. It was proper censorship and driven by authorities. It was actually the police that got involved with LinkedIn shutting that down. So yeah, it's been really full on. And podcasts were seen as a way around that censorship.
yeah,
And we've been quite careful when we've had a couple of episodes talking about anything to do with the last few years. But yeah, if you and that's the suppression, that suppression of people sharing their experience that
absolutely.
found really, and it's still happening, right? There's stuff coming out now. It's really interesting. Just in the last couple of weeks, there's been information about the young care worker in South Australia who was awarded compensation for a vaccine injury. Like, that would never make mainstream news. Like, that sort of stuff was always shut down.
Yeah. Look, I think people are starting to become more comfortable talking about it, and as more information's coming out, like like we kind of self-censor because we didn't want, obviously we didn't want our platform to be taken down, and we also didn't want to alienate anyone, did we? We just sort of wanted to include everyone in our podcast. We didn't want anyone to feel alienated or excluded from what we wanted, our message that we wanted to get out, which is positive mental health.
Yes, and I think the one thing for me, because what I've been doing for the last 3 years is when my friend, he's a former academic, and he knew I was considering doing my PhD like years ago, and he wrote to me in 2020. He said, you should do your PhD on the trauma of this policy they've enacted. But that was in 2020. You didn't even know what was coming. But I think that the big thing for me, because I've been collecting interviews and talking to people for the last 3 years, the big one was the coercion. And my own loved ones experienced that through job mandates, and I was doing everything in my that I could possibly can to sort of, I guess, stall that process. And that I was really determined to help that, because I know that for a lot of people, the job mandates were exceptionally difficult. And so it's not just about the unvaccinated. This is about the coerced, the injured, This is about the breadth of experience that was, during that time. And, even lockdowns, for some people were devastating. But, I heard
Oh,
some
absolutely.
meditation.
Look, I think I sent you that statistic. For people who are tuning in, it's sort of late February 2024 when we're recording this. And so a lot of information's come out over the last sort of month or so. But the statistics that have come out of Victoria in Australia, which had one of the harshest lockdowns in the world, there was an 87, this was in the Australian newspaper, so, published this week, 87% increase in suicides in that state from 2022 to 2023. For me, as someone who's had mental health struggles for the last decade, honestly, Mel, it's heartbreaking for me. Now, I know that there's a lot of things that are going on, but to discount what's happened where, and mainly young people, and honestly, a lot of young men, their lives in Victoria over the last couple of years, and obviously there's a range of factors that could go into that, but that lockdown period and that period of time has to be looked into. I'm no psychologist and I'm no doctor and I'm no scientist, but there's got to be that period of time, particularly that 2 years, must have been so tough for people.
Yeah, and it's still ongoing, Sean. Like I was just reading again, through the Australian Financial Review, how relevant mandates still are in New South Wales, Victoria, and WA. So you go to even university to study any medical field if you don't have 3. And do you know how few people that age 3? And Victoria is still mandating heavily, and it's all for, you have to have the booster. So it's still ongoing for people where they are being shut out of even study as a young person if, they don't comply. And I think that it's ongoing. It's not about what happened even just 4 years ago. This is happening now.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So look, obviously there's a lot of information out there on the politics of it all and stuff like that. But, how's it affected you, Mel? Because one of the reasons why we've taken a bit of a break is because, both of us wanted to sort of stop being so worried about censoring ourselves and to kind of speak up and get this out so we can move on, basically. But you and I have talked a lot over the last couple of years on the podcast and more privately, more than anything.
Yeah.
It's had a real effect on both of us mentally and, the way that we've sort of experienced the last 3 years. How's it affected you?
Sorry, my trust for other people. I'm lucky to have a beautiful, supportive partner and friends. But I was really heavily involved in the community, always have been.
Yeah,
and it's only been like a couple of months where I stopped thinking when I met someone new, like, did this person want me dead? Did this person think I should be locked up? Did this person, it's hurt my view of my country. I feel no allegiance to my country. I have no idea what Australia is anymore. I find it really difficult to believe that people are focusing on all these other things without talking about what happened with people turning on each other in this country. And I'm just finding it, there's something about me that's hardened, that I put my walls up, and it's still ongoing. Like just before Christmas, someone that I made a new friend, and we never spoke about what's happened the last few years. And all of a sudden she mentioned something about anti-vaxxers, and it's just that constant trigger. Like I'm just like, oh well, you've never asked me what my status was. Does that mean you're not going to be friends with me anymore? Like it's just a couple of months ago, Sean. Like it's still some people have had that belief, and so I feel triggered. There's so many triggers for me, and I'm still heavily isolating. I don't go to networking events or anything like that anymore. I don't. It was really hard for me because I live on Derby Street in Newcastle, which is really well known. It was really bad during the mandates, and so my doctor wouldn't even see me. And when now my doctor sees me down the street, he just turned his head, and we used to even talk. And my hairdresser across the road, I wasn't allowed back. And they duck every time they see me. It's so almost like a reminder for me every day. It's that, I guess it's that trauma trigger where, because there's been so much silence about it because we can't talk about it. But people will remember, Sean, because why would someone keep crossing the road to avoid me, or why would they not have let me come back to the salon?
Well, probably because they're experiencing trauma themselves.
Yeah.
And that is that, they're probably embarrassed about how they treated you, to be honest. That's probably, and that's their response. And so that this is one of the things that's going to take a long time for us all to heal from.
But if we still have to speak in whispered tones and behind closed doors, like I know there's a lot of people now who are wanting, and that's been evident from me doing the interviews and talking to people over the last few years. So many people were straight up, well, I want to be anonymous. I want to be, because so it makes me wonder, is there all these private conversations? I mean, one of the people I spoke to, that their partner threatened to end the marriage if they didn't vaccinate. And so they did, and they never spoken about it again. Some thing in the, how does that work? How is that going to, that's what I think is really devastating about the whole thing, is that there's people living in marriages or working for bosses who threaten them, and they're still supposed to go to work and go to value sessions and stuff. It's just it's almost like the Truman Show in a way, where everyone's just
absolutely,
so I don't, and to me, unless we all, I guess one of my things that has come up for me, if no one talks about what happened, then it's going to happen again, because I've worked with MPs. So silence they see as acceptance. But you've been enough in the same system as well, where if no one talks about what happened, then the government takes that as approval for everything they did, and they'll do it again because all that legislation is still there. And so if no, but then I see in Australia, we've always been quite apathetic, right, to I guess people can say that about Australians, they're supposed to be laid back, but it is more apathy. There's a lot of switching off. In the meantime, we're giving our power away. And I don't know, if we don't say what was wrong about what happened in the last few years, then it will happen again.
I agree.
I think we have to really have to bring that out into the open. Because as the government's concerned, no one is upset about anything that happened in the last 3 years, because no one's really made that. There have been a couple of members of parliament who desperately tried to get rid of, companies being able and government departments being able to mandate because they understand the impact on young people. But that's all fallen through. There's been a lot of discussion around known injury that was known way back in 2020. That's all behind closed doors. That's all on. No one's watching Senate estimates where all of this information has come out. That's so in a way.
It's the same as in the UK Parliament. There's, hearings in the UK Parliament. There's one person speaking, and there's no one in the chamber even to watch.
And that if there's no one in the chamber, then they think about how there's no one watching. So I think. In a way.
Well, it just goes to show, if there's no other parliamentarians in there to even listen to the debate, what they think of the situation. It's just, that's what they might say that that's not the case, but that's, for me as an observer, that's what it makes me feel. It's that there's obviously been mistakes. There's obviously been, problems with lots of things, vaccine mandates, the lockdown policies, everything like that. And if our leaders can't even accept that there were mistakes and how we can go about fixing them up, then has affected me greatly.
Yeah, I think like, so last week was really interesting. A New Zealand court found that mandates for Defence Force members were a human rights abuse. That's exactly the terminology used. It did not get reported anywhere in mainstream New Zealand. Yeah. Came to here to Australia, but so it's okay for the rest of the world to know about that, like that term was used because it was a human rights abuse, but it's actually was censored in New Zealand in their own country. So it's really, I think it's really frightening, Sean. What's
absolutely
censorship and
obviously you and I, we experienced the same thing but differently. I mean, I was lucky I could make the decisions that I made pretty easily because I was my own boss. I run a little business where, you know, really it's mainly just me with a casual staff member every once in a while. So I was able to say, no, I'm not going to participate in the vaccination program. And so like that was a pretty easy decision for me, although it did create a lot of family conflict.
Yeah.
You know, like I've, you know, like you, Melanie, I worked in the political system for a few years. You know, like, so I think people were really shocked that I made the decision that I did. I was mocked by people. I was told that I was crazy. All of a sudden, I went from people sort of saying, well, Sean, he's a sensible guy. You know, he's sort of across the issues, and he's sort of like, people come to me for advice thinking that I was some kind of loon or conspiracy theorist. And then when the information started to come out, people would say to me, how come you knew about it? And I would say, it was really not hard to find information.
No, it wasn't.
If you read mainstream news or watched, you know, network television or cable news, you weren't going to get that information. But the information I found for me to make my decision, like most people at the start when there was talk about a vaccine, well, I was quite sort of like positive about that. I thought, well, like, I don't want to be locked down. It was my business was suffering. All of my friends' businesses were suffering. Kids weren't going to school. You know, like, you know, the economy was closing down. And I genuinely thought to myself, well, if we could get a vaccine that's going to work and get us out of this, then I was sort of quite positive about it. So, you know, I was sort of open-minded to having it. But then, you know, like I just sort of, once the information came out about that it was, you know, a different technology and it wasn't the same as, you know, like a measles vaccine or anything like that, then that's when I started to just do a little bit of research about it. And of course, I was mocked for doing my own research. I mean, what a ridiculous thing. And that hurt me as well, because I've always researched things. I've always looked into, you know, anything that I'm going to either be involved in business-wise or be involved in, like, in the community, or whether it's a medical thing or a health thing or what sort type of meditation to do, I'll always look into it. And then so I made the decision that for me, the risk wasn't worth having it. And so I decided not to take it. But after a little while, I kind of kept that pretty private for a little bit because of the shame of it, because I felt shamed. And then, you know, like I was sort of teased, or I was, you know, at one point in time, people were calling me like, oh, well, Sean, he's a flat earther. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I've never mentioned anything about the shape of the earth ever, but I was just sort of put into this sort of tinfoil hat brigade. And, you know, I don't regret it at all. And then after a while, when it was, for me, after it was clearly not effective, that was the first thing. And, you know, the safety issues were starting to come through, but it was clearly an ineffective treatment. You know, I got COVID at the height of, you know, the start of the Omicron wave. And when people found out that I had COVID, and this was at the height of the vaccine hype, I had friends and family telling me to prepare to get to the hospital, that I was going to be on a ventilator and I was going to be dead in days. Well, like, COVID for me lasted an afternoon, and I felt a bit lousy for a couple of days. And then I've never had COVID since. And I know people that chose the other pathway have had COVID numerous times. And so clearly, you know, I'm comfortable with the decision that I made, but it was so it got to the stage then, Mel, for me, that I didn't get as like emotional as you did. And I know how upsetting it was for you. Yeah. And for me, I just got angry. Basically, I just got the shits, and I just had a fuck you attitude. And sorry for the language, but like people would say to me, "Oh, Sean, we're going to go see this concert." And I will have fun. I can't go because I don't have the fucking vaccine. And it's like, you can come and hang out at my house and have dinner, but I'm not allowed to go to a fucking outdoor concert with 60,000 people because I don't have a green tick. And like, you know, there was ways to get a green tick on your phone. You know what? I refused to show it. I would actually on purpose say, see that? I'm red. And so I guess I was angry for a long period of time. And that's how I dealt with it, was just like defiance. And I would just sort of try and highlight the absurdity of it. I mean, I went to a cafe. It was a bakery one day, and there was a bakery and a cafe next door to each other. And there was no one there. It was really early in the morning, and I just wanted a ham and cheese croissant and a coffee. And so I went in, ordered it, and then the guy said to me, "Oh, are you dining in or taking away?" And I said, "Oh, look, I'm just going to eat it here. I'm just heading to the Gold Coast." And he said, "Oh, I need to see your vaccination status." I said, "Oh, look, I haven't had the vaccine." And he said, "Oh, well, you can't have it here." And I said, "Okay, mate, we'll just stop making it." And I just walked to the next little bakery, which shared the same tables, and ordered a croissant and an iced coffee, and sat right next to the table that I was told that I couldn't sit at, and that there was no other customers, and that business lost my business.
Yeah, it was very.
And like it was just so I was just a kind of a little bit defiant and probably a little bit of a smart ass at times, in all honesty, because it was absurd, and for me it was just insanity that I just couldn't believe we were going through, and I couldn't, and so I found that really hard. So there you go. That's all off my chest now.
Yeah, not gonna. And I think you know, I went through the same, like all the emotions as a, you know, like I even had rage. I had rage and anger, and I think that's really, I think anger is what is underneath a lot of sadness in that too. But you know, it was, you know, when Aaron and I were we couldn't go over the border in 2021. Because Palaszczuk brought in, like, shut the borders at Christmas time, and so my mum had dropped off some Christmas presents with someone that I've known since high school, a friend's mum, and she wouldn't even come out of the house. She put the Christmas presents in the middle of the lawn for us to collect because we were unvaccinated, like we were scum. You know, and that's just one of many stories I have. But there's some really horrific stuff, Sean, like was said and done. I have cousins that I've not spoken to for 3 years because I was writing and posting. You know, and I had quite a lot of following on LinkedIn as well. That's where I lost pretty much all my clients. I ended up waiting tables, and I had to, there was one place on Derby Street in March 2022 that didn't require vaccination, and it was an old Austrian guy, and he had his business shut down for 2 days because he didn't have a Medicare card to even get it. So he had to get it, but he's never had a vaccination in his life. He was 65 to open his own restaurant, you know, and he took me on because he couldn't believe what was happening. You know, he said, "No, Australia is a communist country now." I remember him saying that. And he was okay with me not wearing a mask because I had a mask exemption because of my brain injury, my hypoxia. And, you know, I was, you know, one day, this is before even the vaccine stuff, I was on the street for getting a coffee, and everyone was masked because we had to wear masks outside at one point in New South Wales. And obviously I didn't have a mask on, and there was a man who saw me 100 meters down, and he's well known in the community. He has mental health issues, but he's always really well behaved. He's just really cool. And he saw me and he screamed that I didn't have a mask on. He ran for me and he lunged at me. And the guy who runs the coffee shop managed to jump on him at the time he was going to knock me over. And then the people, there was about 4 or 5 people, and they just stood there, Sean, and watched me go into shock on the street. No one came. Like they were like zombies. Like I could not believe how dehumanizing that whole period was. And masks were so, they really dehumanized people to the point where that's how they behaved. And I didn't go out of my house for 2 months, and it was just so. I guess what I have to say is that I also lost friendships, not who were supportive of me, but who also were every time I went out of the house, it was a battle. I would not check in. I would not do anything. I have to say to the listeners that I refused to comply with anything, and I put some friends through a lot of pain with that, and eventually, for me, I didn't understand why they weren't getting as upset as I was. And at the end of the day, Sean, we went through a period where sometimes, all they want to do is go out and have a lunch together. And here I was, really, I got into some big fights with managers of places and that because I had my exemption with me, they would not accept it, and just carried on. Well, my friends were silently supporting me, but I think about that now, and I think maybe if I just made a little concession every now and again, and that's what I did do, Sean. And so
Yeah.
I every day was a battle, and sometimes I didn't. And I have a partner who's amazingly supportive, but I also compromised him at the gym because I eventually wasn't allowed in the gym because of the way I was carrying on. I should be really honest, because they just would not accept my exemption, and that was against the law, by the way, not to accept an exemption. It's from a GP and a neurosurgeon, but I just exhausted myself and people around me just fighting this all the time, and that's probably, it ended up being really, for me, creating more stress. And I've made a couple of apologies to those people that I lost contact with because I was just so focused on fighting this, probably because I had even written in a post, and this is where I ended up with a lot of people disconnecting from me. Like my first subject at uni was bioethics, so for me it was always a human rights. There's a bioethics point where you can't be made to do anything, and that's actually firmly in the United Nations Charter. So no one was. There was complete neglect of all these things that have been put in place over the history of humanity to stop this stuff from happening, what happened in the last 3 years. And it got ignored. It's like nothing that we knew existed anymore, the protections for humans. That's where I came from, that perspective and dehumanizing aspect of it. So they dehumanized us and people became dehumanized in the process.
Absolutely.
I'm really shocked at Australians. Like I really thought that if there was enough of us to fight this, especially when the job mandates came in, but I know because we're one of the most indebted countries in the world. Like people have massive.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. I mean, there's like I was saying at the start of the episode, we never wanted to take a real stand on anything because we didn't want to exclude anyone from our conversation and at that and our message. And over that period of time, the propaganda was more than we've ever seen in our lifetime. Like I don't know what it's like in my grandparents' era or before that, but in my lifetime, I've never seen propaganda and pressure like it. And I hope that we never do. And I think you're right. If we don't sort of talk about it and sort of start to heal and think about all of these things and are we going to allow that to happen again, is important for us to have this episode and get this out of our system because it is right. If we don't sort of address it, then it will happen again. But, people were under so much pressure. Like I would have family call me and say, look, why don't you just get it? It's just like, I don't know why you're putting yourself under all this stress. Just get it. And then you don't have to worry anymore, or you don't, you can just get on with life. And like, I don't regret ever doing it, but like I can understand, like I understand why everyone made the decision that they made.
Yes.
Like there was so much pressure. The media was intense. The pressure to comply was unlike anything that we've ever seen. So, like, yes, it's been difficult for you and me and other people in our situation, but it was difficult for everyone. And that's why I think, we decided to do an episode on it, because everyone, whether they're conscious of it or not, have experienced some form of trauma over that period of time.
Yeah.
So how do we go forward, Mel? What's your thoughts?
I'm just going to ask you the same thing. So for me, like it has to be about talking about it, like to bring it out, like to bring out, there's a saying, the body keeps the score.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It will eventually come out like it did for me after my brain injury.
It did for me after my depression, Mel. I suffered for years without admitting it to myself. And then when even I knew that I was struggling, I hid it from everyone. And then by the time anyone knew about it, I was in real trouble.
And so talking about it, Sean, is sharing our experiences is fundamental to being a human being. So the more people share their experience, and we've, as you mentioned, we've been wanting to do this for a while.
Yeah. And people may criticize us for this episode, but we've got to practice what we preach, and what we've always said, that we've got to be open and honest about discussing these things. So it took us a while to get here, and that's why we've had a little bit of a break, because we didn't know how to go about it. And honestly, we probably couldn't have moved on until we've done it, until we've felt as though, okay, we've got this out.
Yeah, because I do feel like there are more people who, I know there are, just the odd comment here and there that you like, people are wanting to open that conversation, Sean. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some people have the capacity to get over things really quickly. There's no doubt that's a personality thing. Like
sure.
There, not everyone, every single person is experiencing things differently, but there is there is a significant amount of people who, like you said, are still struggling with the trauma of whatever it was, whether it was, being coerced against something they really didn't want, put food on the table, where it's a whole breadth.
Yeah, pay their mortgage, get their kids to school and extracurricular activities. That's what I'm saying. Like you can't, like I understand why people followed along, because, it was so hard for people not to.
Yeah, but if we don't talk about what happened, then what happens when it happens again? And
exactly.
What I would say to people is the possibility of happening again is high, because nothing has gone back to normal ever. Like 2019 looks like, I look back at it as nostalgia. Like it's just been relentless, right? After, it's been relentless the last 4 years of everything that is happening. And that, to me, it's a game of musical chairs, that they know what happened, and the response to COVID was completely breached human rights, but because no one wants to take accountability for it, there is just more and more things that keep popping up to make us not think about it. That's what I like. They don't ever want there to be justice. So then, that's why people get, like, I find it amazing that Australians are so focused on things that are happening overseas, and not one person will talk about what happened here. Australia is considered one of the worst countries in the world for what they did to their people during COVID.
Yeah, oh, exactly.
We don't talk about that, and yet we focus, there's always bad things happening in the world. There's always war. But what about right here in Australia? Like, who are we as a people anymore? If we don't talk about what we did to each other in 2020 and 2021, 2022 to our own loved ones, then I know it's a really bitter Band-Aid to pull off, but it's the pathway to healing. That's at the basis of healing, is to talk about what happened and make something of that.
Yeah, Mel, and I guess there'd be a lot of people like me that, before this whole experience, I never thought that our system was perfect. I never thought the media was perfect. I never thought our politicians were perfect. I never thought that our system of government was perfect. but I kind of believed that in general, it was the best it could be. You know what I mean? Like there's always room for improvement, but like the system kind of worked. But like over the last couple of years, the biggest thing for me is just my complete erosion in trust. Like I just like the erosion in trust in the media for me has just, I just don't really I've got to be skeptical about every single thing that I see because I just don't trust anything that I see or read anymore. Like obviously we were given all this information by experts that were completely wrong. Like they weren't even kind of just a little bit wrong or like sorry, we made this little mistake here and we can fix that up. They were the opposite of the truth. We were told things by experts that were completely false, but the actual opposite was true. So now, whenever I hear anything told to me, like, well, experts say this, or da 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 da, like then now I've got to think to myself, well, I'm gonna have to rethink that, or I'm gonna have to check it out. And I know from talking to my friends and family is that most people think that most people now are starting to think, well, it's really hard to know what to believe. It's really hard to understand what's truth and lie and propaganda and what's real and what's not real, and it's just getting harder and harder. So for me, like, how do we move on? Like there just needs to be like some kind of reckoning in the media, somehow to bring faith back to those institutions that we've all trusted for so long.
Health, like I know that there's definitely mistrust of doctors now, and I will never. I've said to Aaron, I said I'll never see a doctor again. I haven't seen one for 4 years, but I'll never see one again. Like I'm really adamant about that, and people are like, "That's ridiculous," but and I'll probably change on that. But it is so fractured my trust in, like you said, absolutely everything. That I don't know what I don't know what the answer is, Sean, to how we. Obviously, I see a lot of historians talking about this is just a cycle, like before, Rome and all, that's historically people are speaking like that. And then we rebuild after this. But right now, I think we're, if we don't even talk about how this has happened and that COVID was the catalyst for a lot of like restrictions and censorship that's now still permeating everywhere, then how do we actually even create something different if we don't talk about what was wrong? And it is a systems thing. I've got, systems are paramount to everything, and it's all broken to me. It's completely broken. And how we rebuild that is.
My thoughts on it is that everything became so so far out of our control because it was sort of coming from this sort of almost, like the UN, the World Health Organization, then filtered through to the federal government, and then that information all came through. Da, 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 da. And so for me, like what I think is the way forward now is just to concentrate on our local communities and build those local communities. That for me is the way forward, and to reconnect with neighbours, reconnect with our community elders, reconnect with our schools, reconnect with our sports clubs, reconnect with those great community organisations that clean up creek beds and feed the homeless. And that's what I'm focusing on, Mel. That's what I'm trying to really, really focus on is my own local community.
Yeah. Yeah, and that of course is paramount for me, is to rebuild trust with that, because I had that before, and because it is like I even like there's a reason why I moved back here in Newcastle in 2016, and because it's like a village.
Yeah.
I don't know how I rebuild that. I've wanted to move from Newcastle because it has been so traumatizing being shut out. And I'm changing a bit around that. I don't know what the future is for me to rebuild that. It's helping that I've found a community where I'm doing this meditation and spiritual side. That's really helped me. Yeah, you're right.
And you're an artist in residence too at the moment.
In residence up at Nobby's Lighthouse. And that's really important for me to rebuild in the creative community, because last year I did a screenwriting course where it was like they actually critiqued the profile of an anti-vaxxer, assuming everyone in there was vaccinated. Like it was a movie. It was a movie that's been done about. This is no word of a lie. We critiqued a movie. It's called Lost Vegas, and it's about the unvaccinated becoming zombies, and they critique that and just assume this is what the creative industry does. They just assume that everyone is, the same sort of person. And I'm just sitting there going, it was really weird, but you know what? It's still getting out there, back in there.
Of all the movies that you had to critique, was that one?
It was ridiculous. It's still close, but I think this is it's like the exposure therapy thing that I talk about in my memoir about with my brain injury. And
yeah, look, I wanted to talk about. I wanted to bring that up because to come back around to what our podcast is about. You've dealt with a lot of trauma in your own personal life. I mean, you were clinically dead. That's the truth of it, and you had a absolutely literal sense the fight of your life to fight to stay alive. So what's some of the things that you did right to get through that? So how can we heal from trauma? What's some of the things that you did that you think I got that right?
So one big thing for me, there's two. So one was to not deny or push emotions that come up, and just let them pass through you, and use meditation or yoga or whatever you do, but just to sit in the shit is what so that you can let that transmute. Like you can. It's when you're just in denial of emotions, then going back to the body keeps the score. So it's whenever things, and they don't have to be processed for hours. You just sit there and I'm just feeling shit today, and then what remedies can I have?
Yes.
Remedies like walking, going in the ocean, so just going back to basics. And the other thing too, so this is really interesting, exposure therapy. So this would help for me at the moment, which was, during that period, that 10 years I'm talking about, I lived alone. I lived a really lonely existence, and to the point where it became an addiction, loneliness. And
okay, yep.
Living small, I wouldn't go out on dates or anything like that. So eventually in 2016, just before I went to Newcastle, I did 2015, I did an exposure therapy experiment with a therapist, and I had to do all these little tasks. And I think that applies to me now, where I start rebuilding my community relationships. There are some friendships and relationships that are never coming back after the last few years. Because if I'm going to talk about it, then I'm not going to pretend that it didn't happen. So, and I'm not even coming across that, because those people have just chosen to completely, I'm actually dead. Like I've got cousins who I've never had 3 years that I've spoke to all the time. Like that's been a bit hard, but so I'm probably not going to a family event in the near future. I just think, the exposure therapy is really important, is to get yourself out there again, because that's how you build trust. And that's the same for anyone who's gone through divorce or anything like that, where and has been hurt in relationships. The only way is to get back out there. I think for me at the moment is, for me, there is the philosophy in the spiritual world is you're either close-hearted or open-hearted. And for me, I'm only willing to really share the full me with a very select few people at the moment who I know did not mistreat me in the last few years. but that's not being open-hearted, is it really? Like, I have to really put myself out there with boundaries, but
Yeah, this is part of it, I suppose. You're really putting it out there now.
yeah, because I actually until I know what I'm still at a point until I know how someone responded in the last few years, I can't build that connection. Because I do think some of the things that were said were absolutely inhumane, and I don't know how to, if I found out someone had called, they were like, lock them up in camps, and there's like 50% of Australians believe that at one point, or they should not be treated. At the John Hunter, they wouldn't even let the unvaccinated sit in the lobby. They put them out on chairs in masks outside on the footpath, that kind of stuff, John. Like, if you're going to, if you participated in that, I think that's where I would have a hard time. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just rambling here, but it's still a big thing for me where I still get triggered, like, and because I've been doing all that, because I was going to do that PhD, it's going to be a documentary now. But because I've been collecting all these stories, it's like I just re-traumatize myself every time someone, or if today I was reading on Twitter all the people who are still mandated out of work because there was a minister, a member of parliament who is fighting for this, and he asked people, and I could not get over him. I mean, you still can't camp at that, but how we were talking about Morton Island, you still can't camp, and that came up a lot on Twitter this morning, like where people have been caught out with that, where they have gone camping and like they can't camp. So it's still happening, and I think that's where the frustration is for me, where because people won't talk about it, these things are still allowed to happen, and a lot of people are still locked out of work, and a lot of young people's dreams have been crushed because they can't even study a field that they wanted to study because they don't have free. Like it just seems, it's crazy to me, right? But it makes sense because, and if you say that to some people, I say, oh, that's not true. There's no such thing as mandates anymore. Like, people will literally argue with you or argue about what happened in that time, if anyone shares pictures of the Victoria Police getting out that terror squad against, people will literally say, that's not Australia. Yes, it is. Big pole plates on the big beer cap, those, there are some people who literally have convinced themselves that nothing bad happened in the last 3 years. And I think that's really something I find really difficult. But yeah, I think moving on is about, something I learned when I did my master's in dispute resolution. I did a whole cross-cultural Indigenous, and I was up at Townsville at JCU, so I had a lot of Indigenous students, and we learned about talking circles to heal trauma. And, that is where people gather, small communities, and talk about their experience, and they're not holding anything, and they have the opportunity to talk, and then they pass it on, and then they do a smoking ceremony or some other symbolism of clearing out that trauma. And, that's kind of where I sort of was thinking that things might go. Maybe that's fantasy, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that we've still got a long way to go. I think that it's starting to happen, Mel. Like, I think more people like us are kind of just now feeling a bit more freer to talk about it than what we did. Like, we certainly were conscious of saying, well, look, we can't really bring up anything about the vaccine or lockdowns because we might get cancelled. Like, that's the truth of it. And if people, that's how, like, people say, oh, you guys don't have to worry. You guys won't get censored. You're not that big of a platform. We've got a pretty great audience, but we know Joe Rogan, or we know, that none of that. We don't have millions of followers or anything like that. But what happens is that people self-censor, and that's the worst censorship. Yeah. And that's what we've done. Like, we've done that. We've sort of said, we've even told people that we've interviewed, oh, look, yeah, we're happy to sort of talk about COVID, but just don't mention vaccination or don't mention lockdown because we're worried that we'll get deplatformed.
Yeah.
And so, people need to know that. because they were the discussions that we had in the background almost every time we did a show. We'd say, okay, well, let's just make sure that we don't go into the COVID politics area because it's too risky for us.
Well, it didn't matter how big you were, they use algorithms to pick up any words, like that's what was happening.
Yeah.
So if you
we know that we had, I mean, Melanie, we had an Instagram post put a fact check. Do you remember that Instagram post? I put it on our page, which was simply about the nutritional benefits of, I think it was 4 or 5 different fruits and vegetables, like cucumbers, oranges, like something like that. I can't remember. It was just something that I saw, and it was like, cucumbers, have X amount of this vitamin and nutrient and like vitamin C and all this sort of stuff. It was just a very straightforward nutritional post about the importance of fresh fruit and vegetables in our diet. And we got a fact check put on it.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, honestly, and I know that came after our spirituality episode. And for me, it's like, I don't know why that happened, but it's almost like, it almost felt like a warning. It's like, hey, like we can just censor something as simple as a nutritional guideline of fresh fruit and vegetables. I mean, maybe we don't even need to put a post out on that because of course people know it.
Yeah.
But like, why were we fact checked on it? But so people don't understand that, like, that's what us as a podcast publisher, that we're constantly looking at. It's like, we're constantly looking and saying, well, we've got to be careful about whatever we say or whatever we do because we might get shut down.
Well, that was the same with my writing. I mean, sometimes I was able to, it seems, I was writing some full-on stuff up until February 2022 is the last time I wrote an article and published it, Sean, because I had some serious like notices and breaches and it was too divisive too. Like people were really getting like really abusive in responses, not to me because I didn't really get that, but it's really, I just got unfriended. But yeah, it was, I don't know. I think, I don't know, I guess we've spoken about how we heal from this, but what do we think's the way forward, or what do we feel? How do we?
Well, I think that it's not easy. I think that it's like, for me, I've never experienced anything like that in my lifetime. I'm pretty sure my parents' age, your parents' age, our parents that are in our late 70s, early 80s, that I doubt they've experienced anything like it in their lifetime. Our children hopefully will never experience anything like this again. My little girl who's 8, she'll often talk about the government all the time because, like she remembers what it was like for her first day, first week at school. They delayed school for 2 weeks, so she wasn't able to start school for 2 weeks. And then the first couple of weeks of grade 1, she was cut out of school again. Like, she remembers these things. And, I'm not sort of politically ramming anything down her throat. She's her own little girl. But like, so she brings certain things up on herself. She's 7. So, like, imagine what kids who were 13 or 14 went through in 2022, 2023. Imagine kids that were just starting uni at 2022, 2023. They're going to carry this on. So it's not something I think is easy. So I'm not going to sit here and say, this is what I think we need to do to recover. I think what we've done is we've said, okay, let's let this out. So people might listen to this episode and go, it's just Sean and Mel ranting on. Who gives a shit? I don't really care. It's our platform. We can do whatever we want with it. And hopefully some people will listen to it and go, well, maybe it's time for me to sort of, reflect on that period of time and think honestly about it. And, if then we get to a situation where there's another situation like this and we say, hey, look, remember when we did this? Remember when we sort of started cutting people out and isolating people and segregating people and treating people unfairly? Well, let's not do that again.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's a short solution. It's just going to take time. Like any trauma, it takes time. It takes reflection. It takes an understanding that what can we do better and not allow this to happen again.
That's exactly, I guess, what the purpose is, isn't it? So this doesn't happen again. And, you know, I encourage any listeners, if they do want to share their story for this documentary I'm doing with my friend, you know, if you feel called to share, I mean, you know, even if you, I wonder if someone's going to comment on when we post up what, you know, this episode, because that maybe that will open up something.
Yeah, you know, like hit us up on our Instagram page and you know, we the other big thing is forgiveness, Mel. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't move on without that, and that's the hardest bit for everyone.
Yeah,
is to kind of forgive each other, forgive ourselves.
Yes.
To come together again. Like that's the hardest bit, and that's going to take time. Like any damaged relationship or any traumatic period, it takes time for those relationships to heal again. And you know, this is part of our way of doing it.
Yeah.
And you know, Mel, you and I were a very big supporter of each other through this period of time. So people probably thinking, oh, why were they off air for so long? Well, you know, we do this once a month, but we talk all the time. And, you know, like over that couple of year period, you know, both of us had very challenging periods and, you know, we were both there for each other. And I'm glad we're back on the podcast. I've missed it. And our regular listeners have missed us. And, you know, this episode might turn a few people away. It might turn a few people to us, whatever. Then that it's our truth. And like, this is the way that we've felt about things. And I hope that we can all come together in all honesty.
Yeah, so do I, Sean. So do I.
All right, Mel. Hey, people can go and check out your trauma poem. Just give us a rundown on that.
Yeah, I can get out like that. I have proper like PR kit for that. So I'm going to put that on. So they're giving me social media stuff. I can't get that out yet. It'll be I think late next week. But yeah, we'll put it on our page. I'll link to the
awesome
exhibition.
Yeah, put a link on that exhibition because that's really exciting. Quick update. Remember our jiu-jitsu episode?
Yes.
I finally got my first belt.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, it took me a broken leg and 2 smashed tendons, but I got there. So very, very challenging time, but it was such a rewarding experience. So message there is don't give up. My little girl was never going to let me give up. So bit of an update there. I'm really proud of that. That's why I brought it up. Look, it's good to be back, guys. Sorry we've missed you all for so long. We've just needed to work this out. And so now, don't get me wrong, we are absolutely keen as beans to be back on a regular basis now. So anyone who's got any guest suggestions, anyone who's got any story ideas around mental health, overcoming mental health challenges, get in touch with us on our Instagram page. You know, subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and we'll talk to you all again really soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Mel. Good to see you again.
Bye.
Bye.